We drove past a Stranger Things billboard this week, and one of my kids asked me, "What's with all the bikes in Stranger Things?" It was a simpler time, I said. I tried to explain the bikes and what it was like growing up in the 80s and 90s. I tried to explain why it feels so good to reminisce about an era before we had smartphones or 24-hour news cycles. I tried to explain why we're nostalgic for a time before we knew so many things, so much, all at once. The Duffer Brothers built the Stranger Things world as an homage to 1980s classics like The Goonies and E.T. They leveraged the simplicity of the fictional town of Hawkins in the 1980s against storylines featuring wild imaginary creatures. The result is cinematic intensity, juxtaposing monsters and magic against the backdrop next to today of relative naivety. The monstrous Demogorgon and the telekinetic explosions, well, they would have been a lot less interesting in a world where the characters could voice command Siri to call emergency services. When the biggest thing that they have to worry about is their mom's boyfriend or the school bully or losing their job at the mall, the monsters and the mayhem are so much more extraordinary by contrast. For most characters in Stranger Things, in Hawkins, it's a story about the supernatural bursting into the ordinary world. One moment they're going on a date, or they're sneaking out of the house to get to the arcade, and then the next moment they're in a life-sized game battling demonic forces that have burst through the Earth's crust. These kids have to learn the rules of a parallel dimension and how to defeat the dark forces that exist in the scary upside-down realm. But when they defeat the evil creatures that invade their world, the story doesn't end. Now they face the greatest battle of all, being teenagers and surviving everyday life in the 1980s. And there are no rules to that gameplay. It's just the grueling everyday work of repairing relationships, vanquishing grief, and learning to love yourself. That's the resolution to every 1980s epic. Now that you've passed the test in the supernatural realm, it's time to wrestle with real life. Both this week and next, the Parshot open on Yaakov as he faces a challenge beyond the natural realm. In Vayetze this week, we find him as he flees his angry brother and journeys back to Haran. He takes shelter for the night, and in his sleep, he dreams vividly that he's in the presence of God and angelic beings. He awakens with certainty that the dream was a revelation of sorts. Vayikatz Yaakov mishnato vayomer achen yesh Adonai b'makom hazeh va'anochi lo yadati. Yaakov woke up from his sleep and he said, "Surely God is here in this place. I didn't even know it." Vayira, he was shaken. Vayomar manorah makom hazeh. He said, "How awesome is this place? Ein zeki im beit Elohim." It can't be anything besides the house of God. V'zeh shar hashamayim. This is a gateway to heaven. Yaakov's discovery, his stumbling into such a divine space, indeed left him in yirah. He was shaken, and he was appalled that he had simply fallen asleep as if he were just anywhere. We shouldn't be all that surprised about Yaakov's lack of attunement. We shouldn't be that surprised at Yaakov's surprise, because we shouldn't be surprised that he doesn't have much common sense. The book has been telling us so. He can't tell one kind of rock from another. Yaakov is a Yoshev Ohalim. He's a tent dweller, contrasted with his brother Esav, who was Yodea Tzeid. He knew how to hunt and trap. And as Rashi tells us, it wasn't just about hunting and trapping animals. It was also about being conniving and knowing human beings too. We get little glimpses all throughout Genesis of Yaakov's cloistered nature, his unfamiliarity with the basic ways of the world. Away from home and the loving presence of his mother, Yaakov has no common sense with which to navigate his transition to a patriarch. He fumbles his meet cute with Rachel. He weeps on the first date. Here is this beautiful shepherdess, and he can barely get out an incoherent and incorrect observation about the way that sheep work and when they need water. In the version of the scene directed by the Duffer brothers, Yaakov's heart is beating out of his chest as he feels his destiny closing in on him, and a Kate Bush ballad is playing in the background as he pushes the stone off the mouth of the well. But Yaakov, he knows his fate, and so do we. The promise that he's going to be lavished by and protected by blessings. Why should he bother with petty things like making sensible conversations with his intended or repairing his relationship with his estranged brother? It's very easy to avoid everyday problems when your excuse is that you're busy prophesying and saving your people. The trouble is that sometimes epic heroes like Yaakov don't mind when real life becomes collateral damage to their greater purpose. When Yaakov encounters God and the ladder full of angels at Beit El, he should by all measures be in the midst of a personal crisis. Rivka has warned him his brother Esav is fixing to murder him over the stolen blessing. That dream should be a personal epiphany, a moment for Yaakov to realize the damage he has done, to turn and run home, back to Esav with contrition, maybe back to his mom for guidance. But Yaakov doesn't return to Canaan or to Esav or to his family at all. He escapes into his newfound relationship with God, saying, Asher titen li, aser aserenu lach. Everything you give me, I'll offer a tithing back to you, God. By the end of the scene, Yaakov's in full relationship and conversation with God. But he'll go more than 20 years before he speaks again with his brother. In the next book of the Torah, we're going to meet another man who is fleeing for his life. Moshe is wanted for manslaughter, and he escapes to Midian, where his acts of kindness and bravery earn him immediate respect. We watch as Moshe's attunement to the needs of people right there around him grows sharper and stronger with each passing year. Vayar besivlotam, vayar ish mitzri. Joseph sees the suffering of the Israelites. He sees the Egyptians beating the Israelites. The text calls for us to see this as a measure of a divine aspect. Just a few verses later, as we repeat at our Seder table, Vayar Elohim et bnei Yisrael, Vayeda Elohim. God sees, just like Moshe sees. Moshe is a keen observer of the world. He is tending expertly to the flock of his father-in-law's sheep when he comes across a bush that is burning but isn't consumed by the flames. Moshe sees a glitch in the matrix. And it's the contrast of that moment with everything that Moshe knows to be true about the natural world that serves as an invitation into a relationship with a God of wonders. The 15th century Spanish commentary of the Akedat Yitzchak teaches that we should understand Yaakov and his shortcomings through the context of Moshe's attunement to the natural world. He writes, leading one's sheep in the best manner possible, utilizing all the knowledge of natural law, brings one to the threshold of engaging higher norms, the supernatural. This encounter was certainly not accidental, that is, the encounter with the burning bush. The vision of the burning bush, he says, alerts Moshe to the fact that there are phenomena which cannot be explained rationally. To gain an insight into the significance of such phenomena, Moshe steps closer to examine the spectacle. He wants to know if the fact that the bush was not being consumed was due to its fire being only apparent fire, or whether it was real fire and there was something strange about the composition of the bush itself. In other words, Moshe is an expert shepherd. He understands patterns of the natural world, how sheep work, how fire burns, how people work, how they sometimes beat others unfairly or crowd the well even when others are thirsty. He sees this anomalous burning bush and he stops in his tracks and he turns toward it. The 13th century French commentator Chorny writes that the way this phrase works, asura na va'ere, he's going to turn and look at this bush. It's an indication that Moshe was not startled by the bush, but rather drawn in, curious, not as you might expect, asking a million questions that anyone would reasonably have about God or God's rules or God's supernal realm. Moshe doesn't ask how the game is played or what rewards he'll receive from this great power. Instead, Moshe asks God how he will navigate the impossible situation he finds himself in amidst the worst of humanity. I'm a man of many flaws, says Moshe. Slow speech, they'll never listen to me. God tries to assuage Moshe's fears, promising wondrous miracles that will surely convince the people. But what convinces Moshe that all will be okay isn't the promise of a rod that will turn into a snake, or an arm that can turn scaly and unscaly, or the power to turn water into blood. All of these can be replicated by the sleight of hand of Egyptian magicians. What finally convinces Moshe is the promise that his brother Aharon will be at his side. Even God doesn't seem to understand why this promise, and Aaron will be with you, the promise of a simple brotherly show of support, that's the thing that convinces Moshe that he has what he needs to shepherd his people. God is explicitly angry that the miraculous signs God offered didn't persuade Moshe to take the mantle of leadership. But that's because God is an expert on the divine, on the supernatural, the governance of the world in another realm, the world above. Moshe is an expert in humanity. After all, the first thing Moshe does when he finishes speaking with God is return to his father-in-law and ask for his blessing to return to the Israelites in Egypt. That's a street-smart man, knowing that no command from God or prophecy can excuse you from checking in with your wife's family before changing the trajectory of your entire life. Most days in Hawkins, back in the Torah with Yaakov and Moshe, most days, these days in 2025, they don't look like an episode of Stranger Things or a scene from the Torah. I haven't seen any demons or burning bushes lately. I haven't even had any dreams where it seemed like God was talking to me. But we do live in an era where the theme every day seems to be another set of unprecedented times, where there is always a new crisis, something personal or professional or spiritual. Sometimes a combination of all three. The more dramatic the event, the more likely we are to ascribe meaning to it, to look at big moments as revelations about our bigger purpose. But if the times when we pay attention are only the times when we tell ourselves these are the moments that really matter, then we're not living in this world or for this world. We're living only for the sense of a higher purpose and not this world. That's not self-actualization, that's escapism. Jacob's dream at Bethel was probably the most exciting thing that had happened to him in a very long time. But that's not where the real work was. The real work was in figuring out the stuff that's waiting for him back in Canaan. The real work wasn't in the dream, it was in the reality that he awakened to, a brother from whom he stole, the need for reconciliation, the hard work of showing up as a son and a brother and a husband. You can't ever get away from that work. In fact, we're meant to turn towards it, like Moshe, who finds himself standing before God and airing his concerns about the plausibility of his leadership, doubting himself out loud just enough so that he can get the help that he needs to be a good man and a sensitive leader and an effective vessel for changing the trajectory of his people. The real work isn't in heaven, and it's not off in a dream. And you won't finish that work even when you slay the monster or vanquish mysterious dark forces. You won't find it hidden in the flames of a burning bush or at the top of a fantastical ladder. The real work is right here on Earth. It's at lunchtime in middle school, in the little choices about how you show up. It's the way you hang your anger and anxiety on the coat rack as you walk in the door and manage to shield your loved ones from the pique and annoyance that they didn't cause and certainly don't deserve. The real work isn't on stage at a performance. It's who you invited and what you did that made them want to show up. It's not spectacle or radical self-sacrifice. It's self-effacement in the little moments that allow others to shine. You'll never find the real work in the promotion into a position of authority. The real work is every little thing you did to earn the confidence that got you the votes, that got you there. Surely this week you will find yourself amidst at least one moment of chaos, maybe even as soon as this afternoon. You might find yourself dreaming of a ladder, a deus ex machina that will swoop in to tell you this little problem is nothing in the grand scheme of your life and purpose. Don't let that spectacle distract you or draw you in. The still small work will be waiting for you when you wake up. Turn towards it.